coming up on today's show.
And people feel terrible. They feel like they have somehow failed the system rather than the system failing them.
You can see that I have 4 dots on Thursday, but you don't know what it is, and that's another, I guess, a disadvantage of digital.
People are overwhelmed by the choices of to-do list options because there are so many apps.
Paper versus digital organizing, part 2, today on Keeping You Organized. Well, welcome back to Keeping You Organized. If you joined us last time for part 1 of our discussion on paper versus digital, you know we barely got through it. We talked about reading and taking notes, but we want to talk more about organizing, so we're bringing back Julie Bestry from juliebestry.com, certified professional organizer, NAPO, the National Association of Professional Organizers. Julie, welcome back.
Well, it's good to be back. You know, I love talking with you about organizing, and particularly about things regarding paper.
Well, and you know, we get this debate, and we'll recap a little bit here in a moment about what we talked about last time, but you know, we're talking paper versus digital. And you know, a lot of people say, oh, you know, doctor's office, they're all, you know, digital now, and you know, they were required by the government to get rid of a bunch of this and that, but I still go to the doctor's office, and they're still using paper there. And I think in offices all across America and homes, we're seeing a lot of paper. And so we talked in the last episode. Let's just recap really quickly about the reading and also the taking notes. And then we'll jump into our next steps here of organizing paper versus digital.
Sure. So we talked about the fact that there is no one right answer. So sometimes digital is right for you, sometimes it's paper. And that has to do with your personal style. It also has to do with what we know about neurology, and how the brain works. And what research has found specifically is that if you are looking at organizing information in terms of taking it in as well as storing it, then handwriting, longhand on paper is the way to learn, because you are organizing that information by thinking critically and contextually about it versus just taking things down verbatim, like taking dictation.
Right.
Also found that there's a hyper personalization, great memory and sense of branding if you're reading paper messages, persuasive messages in marketing. So if you tend to buy a lot of things that clutter your homes, you want to try and get more of your messages from online ads that won't be persuasive, and you maybe don't want to read your direct mail and your pretty glossy magazines in tangible form.
Okay, well, let's move on to calendars now, because that's something that, you know, is a whole industry of printed calendars, whether they be the ones you put on your wall or the, you know, the planner books, or, I mean, there's a zillion different kinds. You've seen them all, I'm sure. And then digital, you've got everything from the calendar that comes on your phone to Google Docs or Google Calendar. And so when you're working with a client, how do you bring up this discussion and kind of determine what would be the right thing? Because I'm assuming the right thing is, there is no right thing. It's like what works best for you. But how do you have this discussion with a client?
Well, it's very personal, and there's a lot of, I have to say, guilt involved, because people who forget appointments, they say, I have a calendar, but I miss it, or I have a digital calendar, but I'm not next to it when it dings at me. I don't remember to look at my calendar, or I have a calendar, but I don't like it. And people feel terrible. They feel like they have somehow failed the system rather than the system failing them. But I tell people it's all about their personal and their digital, their creative approach to things, whether they are visual or not. And talking about visual, you know, you have the new coloring book folders.
Yes, the coloring folders. Yep.
Well, I just got something in the mail on Saturday from Franklin Planner, and they're now having coloring book pages for their paper planners to help engage people. And you know, maybe that's, you know, a sort of silly promotion, or maybe it recognizes that the reason why people still like a paper planner is because they feel like they have control over how the information looks. For some people, they want something very linear, all the same font, all the same color. Other people want to use magic markers and color code. And it's not that you can't color code with digital, but you can't do it your way in your handwriting, at least not yet. So I ask a lot of questions from my clients to get a sense of, what have they used in the past that works comfortably for them. It may be that a paper planner works best with a digital reminder on their phone for 9 a.m., 1 p.m., and 5 p.m. to sort of go ding and have Siri tell them to look at their planners. So if somebody is very linear, digital may be better. If somebody tends to think in terms of landmarks rather than street signs, say, oh, turn left at the church rather than turn right at Main Street, they may be so visually inclined that what they want is a paper calendar.
Right.
So the way to approach it with any client is saying, well, what has worked for you before? Where have the challenges been? What problems have you encountered? And really get a sense of, what do they care about? Do they care about things looking pretty? In the past, you and I have talked about tickler files and keeping your paper so that if you can store the tangible representation of a task, you get a memo that says that you need to bring these pieces of paper to a meeting, and you put that in the slot for Thursday, that's going to work better for some people than putting it all away and having, scanning it and taking it on their phone. But I have had clients say, I love the paper, but it's not even pretty enough for me. And they will take wallpaper or tissue paper or something, and they will decorate the fronts of their tickler files. I have other clients who are just like, just put it all in my phone and I will take it with me in my phone, and I want it all digital. Now, people say, well, is it a gender divide? And I will say, the people who want it pretty, and this is just anecdotal in my experience, the people who want it pretty aren't necessarily women, but they're more likely to be women. The people who absolutely want it linear, there is no divide between men and women. So when people say, oh, well, women are analog and men are digital, that's not true. Everybody, is as likely to like digital. But I do find that my female clients care more about the way things look, but everybody cares about the way things work, particularly with calendars. With to-do lists, on the other hand, we see this vast spectrum, because it's less about having your to-do list digital versus paper, but when people want to do it digital, they're overwhelmed by all the choices.
Right.
And
well, let's hold on just a second, because I want to go back to the calendar.
Okay.
In a previous podcast, we had Leslie Josell, our friend, on, and who works a lot with students. And she talked about, and this is one thing why I like, because, we talked earlier in part one of this about, I have a digital calendar, but I like printing it out. And I like printing it out in that week at a glance, because I like to see the holes. And I like to look at my day and say, today looks really busy, because I have, the blocks together. What do you think about that whole concept of visualizing a week at a time, and some people like the day at a glance, and I'm like, well, I don't know. I like that week for some reason.
Well, and I'm glad you brought up Leslie, because, she is the absolute expert at student organizing and planning their time management. And I really see this and I'm so glad you brought up this whole concept, because while you can see broad strokes on digital, people tend not to use it that way. Whereas when you have a tangible paper calendar, you can look at the day, you can look at the week, you can look at the month. And what's great about that is when you're at the end of the month and you have a paper calendar, you're much more likely to flip it to the next week. So here's a good example. We have a month that ends in the middle of the week, and we're more likely to flip to the next page to look. On digital, you're far less likely to sort of look and sort of scan time in advance. So it's hard for you to conceptualize. They say an analog clock is better for children than a digital clock, because they're better able to understand the relationship of time and how it passes. Well, for many of my clients and for myself, a paper calendar does the same thing. It allows us to have this sort of more complete view of how time passes and how different elements of time fit together.
Right. And you also have on your little phone, you know, your appointments show up as little dots when you're looking at the week in advance. So you really can't see. You could see that I have 4 dots on Thursday, but you don't know what it is. And that's another, I guess, a disadvantage of digital. But we started to talk about the to-do list, and we're going to take a quick break here. And when we come back, I want to get into to-do lists because, one, I do believe they kind of tie into that same concept with the calendar, being able to see it, but they can also be overwhelming as well. So we're with Julie Bestry, juliebestry.com, talking about paper versus digital organizing, and we'll be right back. Now there's a place just for you. Life can be busy, and you still have to keep it all together. That's why you like to be organized and in control. Introducing MyOrganized.life, a special place where you can get ideas and solutions to organize what's important to you, your important papers, your important decisions, your important life events. We show you the ideas and products to stay organized in your life. See what's new. Stop by and say hello. Visit us at any time at www.myorganized.life. It's just for you. MyOrganized.life by Smead. Find us at www.myorganized.life. MyOrganized.life. We're back now on Keeping You Organized, talking about paper versus digital organizing. And joining us is certified professional organizer Julie Bestry, juliebestry.com, professional organizer. Julie, where are you located? You're down south, aren't you?
I am. You couldn't tell from listening to me, but nope. I'm from Chattanooga, Tennessee. I'm in Chattanooga, Tennessee, and I'm originally from Buffalo, New York. So I don't sound like Chattanooga, even though I've been here 18 years.
Okay. Well, great. We're going to talk about your business in a little bit, but let's kind of wrap up this whole, because to-do lists are one of those things that people struggle with. Some people have too many things on their to-do list, so when they look at it, they get overwhelmed and can't do anything. But let's contrast a to-do list electronically with a to-do list written on a piece of paper and some of the pros and cons and how you approach it with your clients.
Well, one of the things that we see is that everybody feels comfortable making a to-do list. You and I could talk about the difference between project lists and task lists until the cows come home, but you can grab a Post-it note or a piece of paper and write out a list and keep it there in front of you. It is not place specific. So if you've got your to-do list at your desk and you go to the store and then you realize, oh, here's another, an office supply store that I need to go to too, but your list of all the tasks you need to, what you need to print and what you need to buy there aren't with you, that doesn't work. People are overwhelmed by the choices of to-do list options because there are so many apps. And it's the same thing again with color coding, with being able to see your big list versus your small one. So I like what I'm looking at is a hybrid approach. And people like Post-it notes. I know that when I'm feeling overwhelmed, I take a bunch of pads of colored Post-it notes, and I write one idea on every Post-it note, and I use an entire wall or a mirror or a door and can arrange things by location where I have to do things, by categories, when I'm working on a big project, when I'm writing a book. People don't feel like they have that with the to-do list apps that they have. So one of the ones that I love to talk to people about is Trello. And I don't usually talk about specific brands. We talked about Evernote a little bit before, but Trello is like making your Post-it notes digital because you have color coding, you have the ability to sort of move them around, but it's like people use them for Kanban, for that doing, done approach, but you can use Trello in so many ways to make these boards and you can group things together. So what I tell people is, if you don't feel comfortable with any particular to-do list, start with something simple. Use the notes function in your phone. Stick to something super basic that is as basic digitally. I don't care whether you use Evernote or your notes or a blank document you keep in your Dropbox, so that it's synced to all of your devices, so it's wherever you are. And then you can experiment, but if you're fine with having a simple, basic, analog-like to-do list, that's okay. You don't have to feel the guilt. If you want to use and try every fancy app that comes down the pike, whether that's To-Do or Todoist, or there's To-Do, which is spelled French style, or Toodle-Do, or go for the really complex things like Asana, or go for something that has the ability to be complex but is actually very simple, like Trello. It's okay, but people need to sort of embrace the notion that they don't have to go fancy to be productive.
Well, what do you think about putting to-do items on your calendar? Because we talked about a calendar. Is that a good practice or not?
I think most organizers would tell you, and there are always outliers, right, that if something is time specific, put it on your calendar. If it's not time specific, then putting it on your calendar is sort of crowding you out of what you have to get done. So there are some calendars, if you're looking at whether it's a paper calendar like planner pads, they have a section where you talk about your projects up top. It's called the funnel system. And yep, you can sort of list tasks, and it sort of funnels down into the individual days. On your digital calendar, or even a regular paper calendar, I wouldn't put your tasks on a specific day unless those are specific to that day. Otherwise, you're just going to have to rewrite them and move them. Having a task list that's digital is great because, like, with Google Calendar, the tasks can be associated, but just putting them right on your calendar day is sort of going to crowd you out of focusing on what your high priority items are for that day. And I really think your calendar should be for your meetings, your appointments, and your high priority tasks.
Yeah, and let's talk about just prioritization, because, like the David Allen method, put all your things on one list, get it off your mind and onto a list, and you end up with a to-do list that's got 25 items. You obviously can't do it all. So let's just talk for a moment about how do you prioritize, and maybe how you prioritize print versus digital.
Well, I think that's great. And if we're going to talk print, I didn't invent this. It's something you see all over the internet, but the idea of if it won't fit in a Post-it note, it won't fit in your life. I tell people...
I think 3M invented that phrase, by the way.
So I think when you're prioritizing, if I'm working with business clients, I often say, what is going to bring in the money and what is going to keep you from getting sued? With residential clients, what's going to keep you happy and what's going to keep you healthy are good things. And I suppose what's going to keep you from getting sued. You want to make sure you pay your bills. So that's an important thing. So your priorities are going to be directly related to your goals. And that is, paying your bills keeps you solvent, keeps you out of jail in some situations. Making sure that the people you love or the people for whom you're responsible have the things they need. So you have to look at all of your responsibilities. There's the old, whether you call it the Eisenhower matrix or you look at what Stephen Covey has done with the 4 quadrants, there's what is urgent, what is important, what is both urgent and important, what is neither urgent nor important. And that really is going to clue you in on what your priorities are. And whether you're looking at digital or paper, either way, it's about getting the things that are both urgent and important front and center. Getting the things that are urgent on the calendar so that they don't get forgotten, but getting the things that are important broken down. So you might look at what's important, break it down into the smaller elements, and make sure that you make an appointment with yourself on every calendar day so that you can hit those tasks. So whether it's paper or digital, you're absolutely right. It's all about your priorities.
Right. Well, I think we pretty much run out of time here. That's our priority, is to make sure we get things done right. But anyway, Julie, before we go, can you tell us a little bit about your business? What kinds of things you do? Are you virtual? Are you just local there in Tennessee? And how can people get a hold of you?
Well, people can always get a hold of me through my website. So my company is Best Results Organizing, and my website is just my name, juliebestry.com, and there's a contact page right there. They can also email me at organize@juliebestry.com. And I work with residential, home office, and small business clients. I'm a generalist, so I work with a wide variety, but as you know, my blog is Paper Doll, and I look at paper and information and time management as sort of the heart of productivity. So even if we're organizing a closet or a desk, it's still all about what is going to help make you the most productive. Because I think most professional organizers and most people will tell you that if you're organized, your life is going to run more smoothly. It's not about making your house look like House Beautiful or being the most organized person in the office. It's about having the time to do the things that you value with the people you care about.
Well, Julie, I've just really enjoyed these 2 episodes. And those who haven't watched part 1, make sure you go back and look at that. All the information we talked about will be in our show notes, which you can always find at smead.com/podcast. Julie, I'm sure we're going to have you back again. And I don't think we really solved the debate, but you really gave us a lot to think about as far as paper versus digital. And I think we'll be having this debate going on probably for years to come.
I think so. And they're looking at those flexible digital things that'll be like paper, but like computers. So the debate will go on as long as there are people having to solve this problem for themselves.
Great. Well, there you have it, folks. Hopefully you've gotten some good tips here about how to choose paper versus digital, or maybe even a hybrid approach. And we'll continue this discussion as we go on, because that's what we do here at Keeping You Organized.